and blessings to y'all. Welcome to the new JustUS Speaks podcast from Just Leadership. I am your co-host, Lester Young.
And I'm your co-host, Hakeem Crampton. JustUS Speaks is being produced to amplify the voices of directly impacted people, particularly the voices of formerly incarcerated people.
Just Leadership was founded on the principle that those who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution, but too often further from the power and resources to affect positive change.
So on this special episode of the JustUS Speaks podcast, we're excited to bring you the audio from the recent Black History Month live stream hosted by our CEO and president, DeAnna Hoskins, entitled Dismantling Jim Crow.
DeAnna is joined in this conversation by leaders who are making history now through their work to dismantle the legacy of Jim Crow.
So indeed, you'll hear from Jay Jordan, who is the CEO of Alliance for Safety and Justice and co-founder and national director of Time Done. You also hear from Kesha Hamilton, co-founder and co-chair of Racing for Equity, and Kyle Bacon, criminal legal reform activist and member, JustUS Coordinating Council Steering Committee.
Here's the audio from the online conversation. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe to the JustUS Speaks on your favorite podcast platform if you haven't already. Peace.
But I want to circle back to where you guys had this common theme of centering voices, Black brilliance. And all it says to me is we are the ones we've been waiting for, right? We've been putting our rescue plan in somebody else's hand instead of showing up. But Jay boldly, thank you for being as bold as I am, called it out with, that ain't where the money is. That ain't where the funding is being poured into to build up. It's actually to try to end. And typically when you try to end something, when you cut off one thing, something else raises this ugly head. So we're always putting out fires in this fight. Jay, here's a specific question for you. How does your work advance opportunities in the community for formerly incarcerated people to contribute to stronger, healthier communities? And I ask that, I want to give some context to that question, because I think the work of Alliance for Safety and Justice, when you talked about police don't keep our community safe, right? Police are responsive. The system is responsive to crimes, but they've used speaking for the voices of victims to actually generate more funding, more police officers saying this is what victims want. And again, centering the voices of directly impacted, formerly incarcerated, we're starting to hear a different narrative. So how does your work actually center around providing those opportunities for people most impacted?
So two ways. Cause we do a whole lot. We do a whole lot. So I'm only gonna do two. One is, I'm gonna tell you beforehand so y'all can hold me to it. One is I want to talk about just like the upstream solutions. And then the second one, I want to speak directly to the economic empowerment work we're doing through Time Done. So just the front end solution thing. So if you have, my brother Mike McBride, he says it best. He says, you know, you're standing by a river, the village is standing by the river, and there's a baby that comes floating down, and you pick the baby up, and then you raise the baby, and you're like, okay. And then another baby comes down the river, and you pick the baby up, and you hold the baby, and the village take care of the baby, and then another baby comes, and another baby comes, and another baby comes. At some moment in time, you're going to want to go up the river and see who's throwing these babies in the river. Right? But we haven't done that in America. What we did, we said, okay, well, this person commits a crime, this person commits a crime, this person commits a crime. Let's just expand the intake of people that are like these babies, right? Like, we don't need to worry about where the babies are coming from. Right. We're just going to build a village around the babies. Like, I get that approach, but it does not solve the problem. You know, we built an entire government bureaucracy around crime response and have sucked up all of the budget for public safety. None of the systems out there in the public safety system is getting at preventing crime from happening. But when you ask voters, when you ask Republicans, when you ask hillbillies in Virginia, right? When you ask the dope dealer in South Central or the gun wearing youngster in Chicago, like, would you rather like have crime not happen or wait for crime to happen? They all gonna say the same thing.
Yeah.
Right? Prevent crime from happening. But like, for whatever reason, government, and this is a big government problem. This is where conservatives and progressives agree. Like, no one likes big government, right? Like, no one likes big government. And we have grown this government so big, grown this part of government so big. It's huge. Think about all of the people it employs. Not just the police officers, but the 911 operators, the DAs, the sheriffs, the stenographers, the bailiffs, the clerks, right? The prison guards, all the free staff, all the nurses, the dentists, the medical doctors, the probation, the parole officers, all the admin people. That tens of thousands of people are now employed and connected to this government bureaucracy that is keeping us, quote unquote, safe. And the function of it is literally not to keep us safe. It is to respond when safety is not around. That for me makes absolutely no sense whatsoever at all. That people are asking for safety and government's like, oh, we'll just expand ourselves. Right? That's wrong. And so what we do is we say, okay, well, what does safety mean to you? And people will say, okay, well, you know, when you look at, we have this thing called scaling safety, where we look at the ratios of like teacher to student ratio, like 1 to 30 or 1 to 15, you know, police to citizen ratio, 1 to 100 or 1 to 1,000. What is the ratio of domestic violence shelters? What is the ratio of homeless shelters? What is the ratio of after school programs or truancy programs or, you know, youth sports, right? Let's start to build up a different ratio so we can begin to siphon the budget, the local municipal budget, to these safety apparatuses that prevent crime from happening. But the only way you do that is you have to dial down the amount of reliance we have on the system. And so decarceration work, like criminal justice reform, is a tactic to get to safe community. It's not the strategy, it is a tactic to get to safe community, because the only way you get that money is you have to, you know, reduce the reliance, which means that you have to reduce hard costs, which is closing prisons, closing jails, laying some folks off, and then funneling that money into safe communities to where the front end solutions are reducing the reliance on a big government bureaucracy. And you have a better business model as well. That's a conservative or a democratic like talking point. Right? Less taxes, more community work, you know, as American as apple pie. Last thing really quickly is we realize that, you know, the whole number around 70 million or 100 million people with records, it's closer to like 100 million people have some sort of arrest or conviction on their record. And, you know, the 4 systems that hold the record, this is just like a criminal record is only a line of data, right? So it's not like I just want to get that clear for people. A criminal record is not like a criminal record is just like your report card from elementary. Like literally, it lives in these 4 systems. The police have a system, the courts have a system, which is like the local system. The state have a system, which is either the DOJ or the state police, and then the FBI have a system. And when you get arrested and adjudicated, it just updates your record, right? That's all it does. And there's no way to erase what's on that record. It only shields from certain entities. That's what expungement is. A pardon doesn't shield anything. No, there's no remedy to erase records in America. I just want to clear that. That's the first point. The second point, those 100 million people, 9 out of 10 of those folks have already served our time, right? We have been out an average of 6 years and are over the age of 30. So all the data and research says we are not committing crimes, right? We are not committing crimes. So 90% of people that have these records that will never go away are not committing crimes, but still face these economic barriers, these 40,000 legal restrictions, 40,000 collateral consequences. And these 40,000 aren't just like, you know, you can't get a job here, you can't get a job there. It is literally blocking out entire pieces of society. You can't work in healthcare, in government, in education, insurance, in real estate, right? And these are the growth sectors. Y'all know this. These small cities around America, the major economic drivers are healthcare, government, and education, right? You know, either you work for the county, you work for the school, or you know what I mean? Or you're a nurse, right? Exactly. Yeah. And so if that's the main economic driver for your community you live in, and you can access that, what happens? Well, you gotta, you know, find a partner who can access, right? So you get these couples that are living places and then they can't live anywhere, because 4 out of 5 landlords are doing background checks now. So you have something called post-conviction redlining, where people are aggregated to a certain political area, and now you have lower economic income, right, in these concentrated areas, right? So that's what's happening now, is like pockets of America have a bunch of people with records living in the same areas, working these low-wage jobs. We're working, we're not committing crimes, but we're working these low-wage jobs, probably not on the lease because we can't get on the lease, right? You know? like don't even know that we can buy homes, don't even know that we can access these pockets of wealth. And so what we do at Time Done is we say, you know what? We're going to do the legislative work. We're going to try and do what we call sunsets, which is, I won't get into that, right? But like we say, okay, well, and we're building an economic platform now. So we want you to understand, what does it mean to have a household budget?
Right.
What does it mean? What does it mean to be able to learn about credit? What does it mean to be able to take advantage of your fringe benefits at your job? What does it mean to have life insurance that don't break the bank, but if you do die, your family ain't got to do a GoFundMe to pay the $10,000 to take to bury your butt, right? Like all these different things. So we are teaching people one by one the economic foundation it takes to be stable, because society has literally blocked people out of it. And we do that. We started last year. We had about 3,000 people go through our first cohort. It was a pilot. And now we're opening it up to our more than 200,000 members. We're growing quickly. It is going to be insane. But what we realize is there's no cookie cutter solution. It is literally the work. It is the hard work of teaching people one by one. So shout out to, like my boy, Him 500, 19 Keys, the whole EYL, the Earn Your Leisure family. If y'all don't know Earn Your Leisure, start watching Earn Your Leisure, the biggest economic empowerment platform for Black folks around. I mean, my son, Jay Morrison, the credit dude, all these brothers who are out here, and these men and women who are teaching people about economic empowerment, that's where, we are centering our work for people with records, is we understand that we've been locked out of the economy, locked out of society. So we're teaching people, each one teach one, and we're going to get there.
Just Leadership USA amplifies the power of directly impacted people by investing, educating, empowering, and elevating their voices so they have the tools and resources to self-organize and advocate for themselves, their families, and their communities. Together, we build an equitable, fair, and just U.S. To date, over 1,400 leaders in 45 states and in Washington, D.C., are hard at work transforming people and communities who are harmed by mass incarceration. Please partner with us to bend the arc of criminal legal reform by donating to our leadership programs today. Our network of leaders is strong and growing. Together, we're building local power for national impact. Every donation supporting JLUSA and our leaders has a ripple effect across families, communities, and generations. With your support, we can continue working together towards our singular vision of a just, equitable future for all. To learn more, go to jlusa.org/give2023. That's jlusa.org/GIVE2023.
Thank you for that, Jay, because I think it's really important when we talk about economic empowerment and financial freedom, right? One of the things that I even learned, like you said, having a pardon, having my record expunged, being 25 years removed, if I move to a new city and I go to a property management, my record comes up. But I own homes. I'm a landlord in another state. But what I realized was that was the way I had to go, because my mortgage application, as many times as I filled out to buy a property, I never encountered the question, have I been convicted of a crime? Ever on my mortgage application has that question ever come. They've never asked me for a copy of my pardon or my expungement to prove a point, right? They went off, do you have a financial resources and do you have credit worthiness? That's all they wanted to know. But you're exactly right that once that economic empowerment is infused into a person, and it's almost like education, it brings on another level of empowerment individually, but it also makes a voice seen by individuals who haven't paid attention. And the last part I wanted that Jay hit on that I don't think people pay attention to, when you talked about redlining around where we can rent, then we start to see the political redlining to even diffuse or make that area of voters a smaller pocket to have influence within the state. So it's all interconnected. So thank you for that, Jay. And thank you for the work you're doing, because it is switching from a deficit base, like Cal said, to not only looking at the asset, but actually educating to become that asset and that resource. So Kesha and Kyle, because I know we'll run out of time, like we could really get deep into this. How does our education system currently uphold or perpetrate racism in our children? Because I think we talked about it. It starts with our kids. So if that is currently being upheld and perpetrated in that, I think we see that. But I would like to hear from your perspective as both of you work in that field.
Sister Kesha, kick us off.
Because I might be quicker than you. I think I'm less winded. So our current education system, the Ron DeSantis's of the world, they are overpopulating our educational system. The black face versus the black voice is overpopulating our educational system. These are the ways that our educational system is continuously perpetuating racism. Education was never designed, as we know, for Black people. It was never designed for anyone to educate them accurately. We designed our educational systems in the beginning. Our history lessons, everything that we taught has been never designed to actually accurately, educate anyone. And then, of course, it was never designed for us to even take part in that. So our systems, they continue to uphold and perpetuate racism, but by not intentionally examining those roots. We refuse to, consider the data without prejudice. We have our data that I'm consistently bringing to our table, our Board of Education table, or that they'll bring to the table, and it's skewed in how it's reviewed and how it's told, how it's shared with us. We don't examine ourselves. Our educational systems, again, the Ron DeSantis's of the world and black face, not black voice, are those who are sitting at these tables, sitting in these classrooms. They're not examining themselves to see, to understand what education is, what it's supposed to be, how it was created, how it's still doing the exact same thing it was designed to do. And of course, they have no reason to. It doesn't affect them negatively. So why would they examine those things? But those are the ways that education is continuously perpetrating racism in our system today.
Thank you.
I want to build on that and something that Jay mentioned earlier. Brother talked about, he said, I'm tired. And I think that resonates with all of us. And I see the leadership of what Sister Kesha has done by not only seeing a problem in her community, but stepping up as a caregiver, stepping up as a community member, stepping up as an engaged citizen to say, hey, I'm going to run for office. And all that it takes to run for a Board of Education seat, a city council seat. We just saw this dust up over the last 5 to 7 years, and people were so focused on what was happening in the chaos that was happening at our federal level, that they really didn't see, especially outside of the major metropolitan areas, how chaotic and how violent our local communities are in communities across the country, like where I'm from in Ohio. My daddy was a Board of Education member. And to know that not only sitting in that seat, how violent of an experience that can be sitting in that seat, but also the effects that it has on the folks who didn't sign up for that seat, the collateral consequences and damages of the things that are said and that happen online, the personal attacks that happen, the misinformation campaigns that happen around someone who is loving and leading in Black community in those seats, to change laws, to change policy, to advocate educators who are in the classroom. I'm the product of a lifelong educator. I can't get my mama to retire for nothing in me because she can't sit down, because that advocate is in her, right? And we hear every single day coming back in from things that we see happening, not just isolated in Florida, but across the country. Those have real material effects. These systems are designed to exhaust us. They're designed to exhaust. So I wanted to kind of share and get that out first and foremost, because folks don't always connect those real life implications when we say, oh, somebody should run for office or go into education or go into any number of these spaces, and how physically taxing and how violent just those spaces can be, and how connected it is to the root question that you asked, DeAnna, about how the systems, particularly education, perpetuates and uphold racism. Exhaustion is a violent product of that. We want to be able to be free to ideate, to dream, to be creative, and to create the communities that we want to. But hell, who has the energy after you fought all day long and you still got to go home and cook dinner, and you're fighting in a food desert, the violence of that. You're walking through the violence of activity that may be happening in your community, the lived violence that you talked about of unsafe and insecure housing. Those are real experiences that impact the educational system from the shoes that I've walked in as someone who's navigating and worked in the education space, started with the babies. They're living and walking through that every single day, even before they get to school, to learn the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s.
Yep. Thank you. You know, I felt the passion, and I think it resonates with all of us, right? I always said that when does the day that this work stops? And I don't think it stops until we're gone. And I used to say I was starting this work so my sons wouldn't have to encounter it. And my sons have both been impacted by the criminal justice system. But I'm just doing this. I think we're all just doing this work for our communities, right? I look at Jay and his boys on Facebook having an enjoyable time and realize I'm fighting for them. I'm fighting for my grandkids. We're fighting so that their outcome, how you see them laughing and being happy now, is what I want to be able to see when they're 20 or 30 and I see something in them, that they're actually enjoying this life and they're having opportunities. But you're right, the system is so resistant. At the NAACP Image Award, Ben Crump says something so powerful in his speech. Mm-hmm. And the fight in Florida of taking African-American studies out of our education system, right? And that if you start to take a person's history, even though it's already limited, even though it's already wrong, when you start to remove that from the history, you're starting to extinguish a race. And that was really powerful to me when I started looking at it of not only is the history being miseducated, now you're even saying, we're just not even going to talk about it at all, right? We're going to act as if this race of people don't even exist. And the detriment of that to what do our children have to hold on? What culture can they build off of something that they're not even being educated on or understand outside of our households and outside of our communities? So thank you for that. I feel like we're hitting this from the bottom and the front, right? Jay's like, no entry. We don't want to wait till we get through the system and get some resources. Let's put it in our community so we don't even have to come into contact with the systems. But also, how do we start simultaneously working within our communities and our education system to build up and invest in our children? So Kesha, I want to throw this one at you. How do we shift the conversation around these issues to bring our voices to the forefront in spaces that have typically excluded us? And I think the most resistant right now, I always say all systems have utilized people impacted: substance abuse, mental health, veterans, women's services, criminal justice, and education has been the most resistance to our voices. And I think it goes back to what Jay said in the beginning. Soon as we have a felony conviction, it's the education system that tells us I can't go on field trips with my kids. It's hard for me to even walk in a building at a PTA where other kids are going to be there. So how do we get those systems where our voices have not only been excluded, have been kept out of the building as well, to actually shift that conversation in our presence?
So we take up space, you know what I mean? We take up space unapologetically, you know, we say the things, you know, we educate ourselves. So that's one thing we do, you know what I mean? We also, you know, like Shirley Chisholm said, and DeAnna, I think you said it differently, but Shirley Chisholm says, you know, if they don't give you a seat at the table, you bring a chair. And I think you said, DeAnna, we bring our own table or something.
We build our own table. We don't
build our own table.
We don't bring
right. We build our own. You know, we always have these conversations about, you know, the fact that we do need all our own stuff. 100% I am there. We need our own. We just need our own education systems, our own employment systems, our own grocery stores. Like we just need our own communities. We just need our own. We really do. Like at the end of the day. But because we're not there yet, because we still have to engage with these systems to some degree, we begin to shift the conversation by getting involved. You know what I mean? We have to run for office. We have to vote. You know what I mean? We got to vote. We have to engage these boards, you know, because like you said, we do have parents who, because of our policies at the board table that say that, you know, you can't come and volunteer in your child's classroom because of a felony conviction. You can't go on these field trips because of a felony. That doesn't have to stay that way. That's a policy. It was created. It can be uncreated. It can be rewritten. You know what I mean? But if we don't have enough people who are willing to band together, you know, as a community, come in numbers, you know, and say, look, you're going to change this. You know what I mean? You're going to qualify in some kind of way so that I can be able to participate in my child's education. I love what you were saying, Kyle, though, as far as just the exhaustion. And as I mentioned, kind of in one of the beginning statements I made, that white supremacy and whiteness, it just keeps adjusting itself. It adapts, which is how it continues to exhaust us. You know what I mean? But it does that even in shifting the conversation, because we're so busy with trying to survive, trying to dismantle, trying to build up, trying to do all the things. We are exhausted, but we can't allow that type of exhaustion, to keep us from doing all the things to shift the conversation. I love what Jay was saying as far as we need a 7-generation plan. Yes, that's what we have to have. We have to be looking far out, and we've got to know that the work that we're doing today is going to impact the future, but we got to do the work today. We got to be willing to do the work today. So do all the things, run for office, engage these boards, hold these folks accountable, call them out, participate with your child's education, and take up space, talk, say the things, unapologetically, educate yourself. One thing that I've noticed in racism work is that Black and brown people, while we understand the experiences that we have, we recognize when we are impacted by racism and through racism, we get those things. We don't spend enough time connecting historically how racism has infused the systematic nature of racism. We don't connect how it's impacting our job, how these policies that they have created are allowing them to treat us the way that they do. We need to educate ourselves. We need to stop with this, turning the other cheek. We gotta do the things, y'all, all the things. We just need to do all the things. We've been traditionally excluded because we don't understand everything. We don't have the time to understand, but we have to be willing to look at that 7-generation plan, educate ourselves, and understand that what we're doing today, it's going to make a difference for tomorrow. It'll make a difference even now, but do all the things, do all the things.
Thank you for that.
We are so excited to invite you to the Just Leadership USA 9th Annual Benefit Gala, Monday, June 5th, 2023, at PhD Rooftop Lounge at Dream Downtown in New York City. We're excited to bring JLUSA leaders, allies, and advocates together in person to unite around our shared values and propel our vision for the future. During the last year, we've made significant strides in building our capacity and infrastructure to become the only national systems change movement and policy table led by and for directly impacted people. This coming June, please join us for our first in-person celebration in over 2 years. Learn more at jlusa.org/gala. That's jlusa.org/GALA.
I really want to take this opportunity because I've been sitting here and something keeps bothering me and I need to share it. And I think Jay touched on this when Jay talked about we have to have decarceration strategies, right? That allows us to shift those resources that were over here to our community. Because typically, if you look at any jurisdiction budget, law enforcement is number one and social services is the bottom of the totem pole, right? So social services are those community safety nets, those investments in our communities, and how that shift has to happen. And I want to throw this question at Jay because I think this has been a national conversation and people are riding this wave that our narrative has been co-opted around defund the police. Because we're not saying get rid of the police. We're saying exactly what you just demonstrated and said there, right, Jay? Taking the most important resources in a responsive to crime and actually start to shift it in a prevention of crime in some kind of way. And I just want to know if you could talk through that, because I think a lot of times we missed it. And because the opposition became louder, we've kind of took a step back from even having that conversation. But that is the conversation at the forefront in our communities of how you swing those resources, that it swings from a response to crime to a prevention and pouring into our communities for safety. So I just want to throw that back because I think, and I could be wrong, but I just think that's a missing element, and the noise has quieted because the opposition got loud, and we're not constantly pushing that narrative in our community of shifting those resources in the way you were talking about for safety.
Yeah, I think it goes back to like this being a government bureaucracy, right? Like, and anytime you fight, so you have any institution, anything that you create, is going to have property that protect itself, right? It's like if you build an organization, the organization's job is to stay afloat, right? It's like we all work for, some entity, right? It's like, hey, you have a COO or you have an operations person that is like, hey, we got to do certain things to keep this thing afloat. And so when people were like, defund the police, of course, the men and women of law enforcement were like, whoa, wait a minute. I got a kid in college here. You know what I mean? What are you talking about, right? And no fault to anybody. That's just what we have to deal with right now as people living under this government bureaucracy. It's like we have an entire government bureaucracy of people work there. And are you going to say, all y'all just lose your jobs? That's a tough one, right? And so it's really, really, really tough. And so, I think that, a very good approach that I saw in just getting at the right, like the question of how do you decarcerate and, and we learned this with Prop 47 when we were looking at the savings, right? Because we passed this law in California called Prop 47, which reduced the prison population year over year by thousands, and it's saving the state about $200 million every single year, right? And that money literally goes back to community in the grant program. So that is like the model. And what we learned was, when we were like, okay, well, how do we get more money out of the system? And they're like, well, we got to start to close some facilities because you have like the lights it costs to keep the facility going. You got all the food that comes in there. You got the staffing time. Like our biggest cost for organization is staff time. You know what I mean? It's salary. So you have to cut down salaries. So how do you do that in a way where we're not perpetuating the same type of othering and not being good people, right? That got us here in the first place, right? Like we don't want to be like the people who built up these prisons and said, we don't care about human life. That's not us. You know what I mean? I'm a real humanist. I care about all humans. And I feel like some humans may have a different perspective that we could be skewed. So we need a paradigm shift. But that's not to say I want to ruin everybody's livelihood. We were never saying that. The majority of folks were never saying that. We were saying this, the system and these institutions are harming us. How do we dial back and then build something different? So the model that I saw in just working on some stuff we were doing in California 2 years ago was a term called high road transition. And I was like, it was just like a lightning bulb, like, oh, that's it. So there was this, when the coal mine shut down, right? Okay. There was a big movement to shut down coal mines. But what do you do with all the coal miners? Did they just are unemployed? No, that's kind of wrong. It's just be like, we hate your industry and, you're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. No, you don't do that. You say, well, how can we retrain these or send these folks to a different part of society and give them jobs? Now, that's not to say retrain cops and give them a job, but I am saying you have to have those tough conversations city by city. If you were saying decarcerate by 30% and close down all these jail facilities, you are literally going to have officers and people who work in these institutions without a job. How do you deal with that? And it's literally something that has to be written in your campaign plan. It's not something that is one size fits all. One way would be a high road transition plan that they do in other industries. Another way is just like negotiate with the unions, right? So we're getting into like really political campaign waters when you're dealing with decarceration to a point to where it has real savings. But like for us, it is that hard work. It is that put your hands inside the dough and knead that dough. And it's not going to feel good for anybody, but it doesn't feel good for us right now. So everybody got to like get some of this work, and we can't be the only ones getting this work. You know what I mean? And so like, what does that look like? Again, it's city by city. It's a lot of negotiations. It's a lot of tough conversations, but we can get there. And I think that when we take the political nature out of it, and I'm not saying the political in terms of like, having to negotiate and do, hand to hand, kind of negotiations in the back room and play the inside game. I'm saying national political conversations. When we take that crap out of it, when we take the Democrat Republican rhetoric out of it, we all agree on a local level, and that's what it takes. This is a local fight. Police are local. States have the statewide budgets. This is a state by state, city by city, county by county fight that's going to take some real tough conversations around decarceration and redirections of people's careers, because that's the only way we get to a W.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Jay. And you said another key word of conversations. A lot of times I think when we have campaigns to decarcerate, people want to constantly be outside with the bullhorn and t-shirt. Somebody got to sit at the table and have a conversation of what does that look like? How do we have this conversation? So thank you for that. And I know we are so close to time, and I wanted to take some questions for the audience. But Kyle, I do want to give you another question. The JustUS Coordinating Council is a national network of systems impacted individuals across all 50 states, including DC, that will inform decision-making at the federal, state, and local policy levels. As a member of that steering committee of the JustUS Coordinating Council, can you speak about the urgent need of this initiative?
Absolutely. With the mission to enhance the quality of life, hard emphasis on enhancing the quality of life of justice impacted individuals by dismantling the policies that uphold systemic oppression and marginalization rooted in racial inequities and collateral consequences in order to restore humanity and dignity. It speaks to exactly to the issues that we're talking about today, the issues of exhaustion. And for me, there was a point that was made a little bit earlier about living in survival mode. There's a chemical impact that happens in our brains when we're constantly in survival mode. That ability to do that 7-generational ideation and thinking is turned off because you're trying to figure out what I need to do today. How do I meet my basic needs today? And the JCC is really about taking our collective power and expertise and experiences, coming to the table, because so many of us go from the block to the boardroom, from the courthouse to the White House, and we continue to have these conversations, but the incremental change isn't happening quite fast enough because we're not being listened to, we're not being heard. And so therefore the outcomes that we know that we need at the end of the day aren't being created. And so to your point, we're engaging in these conversations at the table to continue to move the needle along while we're building our own table that is aimed at shifting those policies and ultimately the priorities of those who have been directly harmed, who have been directly impacted, by centering not only their lived experience, but the lived experiences that create a lived expertise. And we're bringing that together for collective power together.
Thank you for that. And unfortunately, we have ran out of time. I want to thank you to our panelists, our audience, for joining us in this Black History Month as we honor leaders, all leaders, Jay Jordan and Kesha Hamilton, Kyle Bacon, who are making history now. To learn more about the JustUS Coordinating Council and read our new report on advancing race equity in the criminal legal system, please visit JustUSCC.org. For any information on any of the organizations that are panelists, Alliance for Safety and Justice, Race for Equity, please visit those sites as well to support the great work that is being done. Again, thank you to all of you guys. If there's any parting words that you want to empower someone who's watching, please take 2 to 3 seconds each just to say some empowering or parting words to our viewers.
Thank you for having me. I'll say that. And then do all the things, everything, do all the things, do all the things.
As we embrace this grind culture and hustle to create the change that we know needs to happen, make sure that we're embracing and you're embracing radical rest as a part of that process, because this work is about self-work. And if you're not working on you and taking care of you, you ain't gonna be no good to the community or the movement.
Close us out, Jay, and make us pass the collection plate.
Locked up inside of you is all of the brilliance of the hundreds of years of lineage from your ancestors. All the brilliance, all the amazing things, the thoughts, the dreams, everything that come from your lineage is locked up in your bones right now. And all it takes is for you to unlock it. Let's go get that work.
Thank you guys, and thank everyone.